I'm Derek Lambert, and this is my argument on poverty and public assistance. Public assistance and public housing are heavily criticized in America, uh, oftentimes for the intentions of those who use them. But without public housing and public assistance, there'd be millions more homeless Americans than there already are. Um, and without these programs, these people would end up homeless. And the continuation of funding to public assistance and public housing units will eventually lead to less Americans living in poverty, leading ultimately to the strengthening of our economy. Starting with some definitions, public assistance is a government benefit provided to the needy in the form of cash or vouchers, as defined by the American Heritage Dictionary. Public assistance comes in many forms. There's temporary assistance for needy families, or TAMF, the Earned Income Credit, the EIC, which actually provides a tax credit at the end of the year to those who are employed while receiving these government benefits. TAMF is regulated by the Department of Social Services and the Department of Labor and Regulation, and is intended to provide temporary assistance to family in need while they seek meaningful employment. The EIC is a refundable tax credit for low to moderate income working individuals and couples, particularly those with children. Moving on to public housing. Public housing, on the other hand, is housing that is built, owned, and operated by the government and is rented at low rates to meet the needs of those living in poverty. The majority of public housing units comes in apartment buildings, often in the high-rise variety, but they also come in studio apartments and single-bedroom apartments. However, there is a distinction to be made between public assistance and public housing. It's a pretty important distinction to make because not everyone that uses public assistance necessarily lives in public housing development. And on the other hand, not everyone that lives in a public housing development uses public assistance. They each serve their purpose. Some people do use both. But, like I defined, public housing is just cheap housing to meet the needs of those with low income to afford a stable place to live. Public assistance, on the other hand, provides funds to kind of help people get by, help them get back on their feet. Despite criticism of these programs, the statistics reveal the effectiveness of what they are intended to provide, and that is providing those in need with funds or cheap rent so they can live at least seemingly a normal life. The criticism isn't completely unwarranted to assume, given the things that present themselves that come with being able to receive government aid while being unemployed, or receiving rent far lower than the typical cost of rent. But partly it is unwarranted. Oftentimes it's criticized and said that anyone receiving public assistance should be drug tested. And that, I can agree with to a point. In Missouri and Florida and several other states, legislators have passed or are in the process of debating bills that would allow for drug testing for public benefit recipients. And that's due to the argument that those who receive, TAMF or food stamp programs would be more likely to abuse drugs. But the St. Louis Today in 2012 revealed that a year-long study in Florida showed public benefit recipients were actually found to abuse drugs less than the general public. Furthermore, in 2013, a study done by the Cato Institute revealed that a family receiving public assistance could earn a higher income off of these government benefits than they could working a minimum wage job for a year in 35 different states. Additionally, these families could earn more than the salary of a $15 an hour job in 13 states, and more than a $20 an hour job in 13 states. And those are the 13 most generous states in terms of government aid distribution. So you might think, well, if you can earn that much, you can earn a pretty respectable salary just off the government aid. Why wouldn't you just abuse it and use that instead of actually working? Yeah, that makes sense. But from 1996 to 2000, the number of welfare recipients was actually found to go from 12.3 million in 96 to 4.4 million in 2010. So in a 14-year span, that's cutting the number of welfare recipients down to nearly a third of what it was at one point. So, I mean, that kind of shows right there that although the potential is there to earn a decent living off of government benefits, these people don't want to do that. It is a means to get by, but it's a stepping stone into reaching the middle class and climbing out of poverty. And not only are these families moving out of poverty, but the education of their children is also seeing a vast improvement. Children growing up in poverty are more likely to experience mental health disorders, while income that increases among these families in poverty has shown to increase the high school graduation rate among such groups. The increased income leads to outgrowing poverty and allowing families to move into their own homes or into or out of public housing and into their own apartments, their own townhomes, things of that nature. So it makes it all the more important to keep funding these programs to see it through because of the educational value. If these children growing up in poverty end up graduating from high school, they're more likely to sustain meaningful employment or a better chance of going off to college, furthering their education, and further down the road, not returning to poverty in adulthood. Turning the attention to public housing, roughly half the families that use public housing end up leaving for positive reasons, such as home ownership or earning a higher income, allowing the family to move into a new townhouse or a new apartment. The other half leaving for negative reasons generally are evicted or terminated for violating rules, as researched by Wogan in 2014. Those that ended up leaving public housing for positive reasons actually reported being in better health later on and reported earning significantly higher wages, while those that left for negative reasons reported their current living situation as neither good nor excellent and actually found themselves to be in worse health than they were when they were part of a public housing environment. So this study done by Wogan shows the positive outcome of utilizing public housing for the advancement and the aid to move out of poverty eventually. While not following the program is shown, it can ultimately lead to backpedaling rather than progress. It's also important to note that the effort of funding that is put into public housing communities has also been a significant impact. It's not important only just to have these available, but to also, make them a little bit nicer, make them seem like a legitimate home, not just, a secluded apartment complex on the other side of town that's not even comparable to a normal apartment complex or normal living situation. A study done by Cohen in 2003 revealed that public housing communities that were considered well-kept were actually found to have lower crime rates, higher rates of employment, fewer medical issues, and less homicides than those that were considered to be in poor condition. So, I mean, with that, you look at homicides alone, crime rates, that should be a red flag right there that providing these families with a normal living situation or, a modern place to live is going to have a significant impact. And then you look at, employment rates among those communities as well. And it's the positivity that comes from this speaks for itself. And unemployed individuals on public assistance receive less in their payments than those who work while on public assistance will receive far greater benefits. It's also notable that a single individual utilizing public assistance isn't going to receive nearly as much as a family would that's using public assistance. So that's another the point of criticism that somebody's going to abuse the program and use it for financial gain. It's really not all that likely, because they're not going to receive nearly as much as a family would, or a single parent with children. I mean, there's also rules and regulations being put into place that tend to not completely eliminate, but limit the abuse that people can use on these programs. There is restrictions on what recipients are able to spend their benefits on, preventing them from using their government benefits for tobacco, alcohol, lottery tickets, tattoos, strip clubs. This makes it hard for criticizers to argue against these restrictions, as it limits what the recipients can use their benefits for, forcing them to spend their government aid honestly for its intended use. The Massachusetts State Representative Shauna O'Connell said, "If you're not abusing the program, then you should really have no problem with these reforms." And I think that's true. Putting these restrictions on, may ruffle some feathers among those who do receive the government aid. But if you are using it for its intended use, just to kind of get back up on your feet and have a stable life, it should be no problem. And I mean, not only that, but Young in 2012 reported that these welfare recipients are issued their benefits on an EBT card, which is similar to a debit card. They can use it for normal electronic transactions, and also they can take cash out of ATMs, which with cash it makes it a little harder to track, you would think, but certain states have put restrictions on their ATMs from certain places, not allowing welfare recipients to withdraw cash from certain places or certain areas. So the stigma that is associated with public housing and public assistance is largely unwarranted. Government funding for these programs has proven to be an asset to those living in poverty and has helped millions escape poverty. Progress has been made in regards to the restrictions and regulations which limit the amount of individuals using government aid honestly, or dishonestly, I should say. I believe the information and statistics I provided that, will limit the number of so-called, cheaters of the system. And, there's the educational value, people going on to graduate high school, furthering their education, seeking meaningful employment. The number of those leaving public housing units to go on to have their own home ownership, as well as moving to their own apartments, their own townhouses. I mean, that's 50% of public housing tenants leaving for positive reasons. And not only that, I think the negative statistics I showed as well, the 50% leaving for negative reasons, or, the restrictions on not being allowed to buy tobacco, alcohol, all that, shows that they're making a strong effort to filter out those that are trying to cheat the government and use this government aid to be lazy and to be unemployed. So I think public housing and public assistance will not outgrow its fair share of criticizers, but it will help and aid those continuing to outgrow poverty. Furthermore, the information I provided, I think, highlights the lasting positive income out of such programs, proving that the importance of continuing to fund these will continually decrease the amount of those living in poverty.